All right, the Detroit Lions got some hard news, if I'm being completely honest, heading into training camp, which kicks off right about now. And so that is the exciting thing. There's a lot of fun, interesting storylines if you want to stay up to date with everything Detroit Lions through training camp, preseason, to the regular season and beyond. Lock in right here with us at Sports Talk Detroit. We want to absolutely be your go-to source for Detroit Lions content. And the Lions have placed 4 players on injured list going in. And depending on which article you're reading, depending on which site you're looking at, it's either surprisingly on them or not. And now there are 3 that we kind of anticipated being there, but you really hoped that they wouldn't be. And then there's another one where, honest to goodness, it is completely different and I did not expect to see it. But the Lions also signed another player that could actually make some sense with this, depending on how bad the injury is, that might even have a chance to make this team. They just filled out their final 90th roster spot. So we're going to talk about that later in the video too. But who are these players? The Detroit Lions have placed 4 players on injured lists, and I'm going to show you who they are. You have a surprise one and then 3 normal ones. DJ Reader, we all knew with that torn quad that he was going to be out at least for training camp, if not the majority of the preseason. With a veteran like this, you don't worry too much about stuff like that because you realize really quickly, like, okay, he'll probably be able to pick up the scheme and fit in fine. He's a veteran. He knows what he's doing. Now, he is on a new team with us, so that does make it somewhat worrisome. You want him to be out there. You want him to be playing with the guys, getting in that role, but hopefully he's rehabbing and it's going well. He's done this before. He has a torn quad that he tore last year. He did that before and recovered from it and ended up being every bit the player he was beforehand. Marcus Davenport is doing exactly what we expected Marcus Davenport to do. We talk about how he could be a good breakout candidate, but at the same time, we talk about the injury, and he is still rehabbing that ankle. All right, he's still rehabbing that thing. That, to me, is kind of disappointing when you have 2 free agent signings that are still hurt. We know Brad Holmes has a penchant or an ability or a fondness of bringing in hurt players, but usually it's in the draft with torn ACLs. It's hard when you sign guys off free agency and when training camp starts, they're still not there. Let's hope that this is more precautionary with Davenport than anything else. Then the one that is frustrating to me still is Brian Branch. We knew he was hurting and battling something toward the end of last year. In the playoffs, when he tweaked an ankle, we saw a lot of that. And then Dan Campbell said, hey, we realized in the offseason we needed to clean it up a little bit. So that's exactly what we did. Well, that is putting him on the PUP list, the physically unable to perform list. He is officially on it, as teams needed to do that on Sunday as they were reporting what they had. Now, here's the unexpected one. It's the big man, the new rookie, Giovani Manu. All right, he had an undisclosed injury, but it is the active/non-football injury list, the NFI. This one is confusing to me. Why is Giovani Manu on this? All right. It's like you just get hints of like, is it a jet ski accident? We've seen those before, right? Is like, what is it? And what is the reason that this guy is hurt? Is it a complete freak accident that nobody could have avoided? How bad is it? That's the other question we have to ask ourselves. Or is it something simple? And I hate to say this, but it is something as simple as like, you know what? He got hurt. We realize he's not going to be ready to play this year, so we can keep him on our roster. If he ends up being on the NFI list, we can put him on the IR later in the year. I don't know what this looks like, but here's what I do know. For a developmental player, like we knew it was going to be at least a year, likely 2 or even 3 years before this guy was ready to sniff a football field and play meaningful snaps. For him to now miss the beginning of his first training camp is awful. Like that is not good news. Remember how far back this set Jamison Williams. Like I'm not saying Manu is Williams. I'm not saying offensive line is the same as wide receiver. I'm not saying any of that. What I'm saying is J-Mo missed his first training camp, and it took him forever to get acclimated. Then going into the next year, there was the gambling thing, and then there was a hamstring tweak, so he missed even more time. And now here we are sitting year 3, and what we're hearing from spring ball was that he is a man on a mission, but it's year 3. So in a guy that was already going to be difficult to bring along quickly, for him to be out, this is the single most important time for his development. Training camp and preseason. There is no other time that is more important for Manu than this time. So the Lions went out and they did some things, and I'm going to also look at a couple of these other injuries and show you why it's not the worst thing in the world. But the Lions have gone out and they have signed veteran guard Ike Boettger, all right, or Boettger, or however you say it. I'm going to be honest, I don't know much about him. Here's what I know. He was absolutely good enough to start an entire season, including multiple playoff games for the Buffalo Bills when they made their AFC championship run, all right, when they got to the AFC championship. And while doing it, put up pretty decent numbers. But here's the other thing you're going to see. 2021 season stats, and the reason I'm going 2021 is because that's the last time we have seen this guy play meaningful snaps in football. All right, when he did, he played 618 at left guard. He was overall effective enough to place in as a guard with a good pass blocking skill set. He is what he is, but he hasn't been able to do anything the last 2 years. In fact, last year he didn't play a snap, and the year before that, in 2022, he only played 6. So you have to wonder, with a guy that's at 29 years old, how much is there left in the tank? It's not that he's too old, but people's bodies age differently. All right? Maybe his just started to slow down, and for a guy that was never an elite athlete, maybe it was just too much. Maybe it was. But here's the good news that I have for everybody else. When you look at some of these injuries, when you look at some of the struggles. So let's first go ahead and take a look at the defensive line. You have Davenport and you have Reeder. Both guys are penciled in as starters, all right? You can almost pen them in as starters. But behind Reeder, you have guys like Broderick Martin. You have Levi Onwuzurike, who we're hearing is in the best shape of his career, that the back is looking healthy, and it's good. You brought in Kyle Pecco to be kind of that backup in case Reeder is not available. You have Mekhi Wingo, who, even though he was a 6th-round pick, has some resemblances in his game to some really good defensive tackles. He's not Aaron Donald. That's not what I'm saying, but he has some of that wiggle in his game. Behind Davenport, if he's unable to get healthy, you still have Kaminsky, who I didn't think was going to make the team this year. I thought he would be a salary cap casualty. But if Davenport can't get healthy, they might like him to stick around. You have Josh Paschal, who's continuing to develop. James Houston is back healthy. Matthew Betts, what is he going to look like coming out of the CFL? All right, the Canadian Football League, in case for those who are wondering. So there is plenty of depth, and I think that's the big thing in the past. If we go back just a couple years and we had 3 injuries to starters, all right, I didn't even get to Brian Branch, but Reeder, Davenport, and Branch. If we had 3 injuries to starters, it would be like, wave the white flag. It's time to surrender. This team isn't like that. There's plenty of depth on this defensive line. When you go into the secondary, all of a sudden it's like, oh man, Branch can't go at nickel. Okay, that's understandable. We got Amick Robertson. We got Enos Rakestraw, right? We've already brought in Davis to lock up one side at corner and Terrion Arnold to lock up the other side. So now all of a sudden you're like, oh, there's plenty of depth back here. Kendall Vildor could do it, right? But Robertson, he's ready-made. Throw him in the slot. It's not a problem at all. No, he's not Brian Branch. And yes, you were hoping that you could put Branch back into the safety role, but you got Iffy. You got Kirby. And the fact that Kirby's not on the PUP list is actually good news because he was dealing with a hip problem. He had some work done on his hip in the offseason. So he's not on the PUP list. That's great news. You need him healthy. So a lot of stuff going on, some difficult news for the Lions to start off, but at least this team is built differently, so you can be excited. All right, thanks for watching. See you on the next one.